Our Computex 2025 coverage is made possible by Corsair, Asus, Phanteks, G.Skill, Lee, Seasonic, Thermal Grizzly, Trix, Team Group, Antec, Pro Gamers Group, InWin, BitsPower, Be Quiet, Cable Mod, and Cougar.
What's going on, guys? I'm Stuart from TGF. It is Computex Day 3, I believe, and we're here at the G.Skill booth. Now, they always put on a show here. As you can see, they have their Pro overclockers here in their overclocking competition. So it's split into two different areas. So this first part here, all of the motherboard brands compete off against each other. So you have ASRock, you've got Gigabyte, you've got Asus. It looks like G.Skill has their own team, and then you have MSI. So they all compete. There's no real prize for the end of it. It's pretty much for bragging rights. So if MSI or Asus come out on top, they will love that. Then when we walk along here towards the other end, they have G.Skill's own in-house competition. They've been doing that for many, many years. And these are the 9 final qualifiers up there. I'll get some B-roll along the top. So they've been going day in, day out. They've been submitting their results. And then at the end of Computex, I believe tomorrow on Friday, they will have the final ceremony. It normally comes right down to the wire, and they'll have a big announcement. They get all the showgirls out here, and it is a huge party. But anyway, let's jump in and see what gear that G.Skill have on display. Of course, being G.Skill, we will be checking out their memory first. Now, I didn't think there was going to be any new stuff on display, but not all of this, probably not this stuff, but all of this stuff, I can't really say anything about. They didn't even tell me anything about it. It is for an upcoming project, probably a new infrastructure coming out, which I didn't know there was, but we'll have to wait and see. So this is the Trident Z5 Neo X. So that's this whole range here. They have the Flare, which is the X. So anything with the X is this new memory that is going to be coming out. So this here is looking pretty crazy. We got some fluoro looking memory. We've got the yellowish green and then the orange. They've got some of these in builds. Like when these are out like this, it looks a little bit different, a little bit maybe too far out there. But when it's in a themed build, it doesn't look as bad as you might think, like the bright orange or the bright yellowy green LEDs. Not too bad. I can't even talk anything on sizes. I guess sizes isn't too important for most people because we know there's going to be either 24, 48, maybe 64. For speeds, I don't have any information on that, whether it's going to have a clock driver or not. They haven't told me anything. Moving on to some more, they have the Trident Z Royale version of it as well. This actually doesn't say X, so they might have a different version of the Royale, which is over here, which we'll have a look at. But they've got some other ones where it's really nice. It's going to have fingerprints all over it. I'll clean it up for when I get some B-roll. This is the same one, Neo X. It's got a nice matte finish on the sides. Of course, the RGB on the top. And then they have the Piano Black, and the Piano Black has a clear logo text design, so it's very hard to see, but it is kind of just clear, nice and subtle. Doesn't really matter too much on the side because on most systems you're not going to see any writing. And then on the white model here, I'll grab this other stick, which is this one. They want to know your feedback. If you had like an all-white kit like this is a glossy kit. Would you prefer the Trident Z, I'll get this a little bit so we can see it, the Trident Z text to be either silver, like in the bottom one, or the text to be black, like in the white? Personally, I prefer the more subtle silver. It just looks a little bit cleaner, not as bold. So we'll slowly move back over this way. It's going to be quick, this one. Not really too much to talk about. Over here, we have this sick-looking kit here. Now, I know when it comes to the Trident Z Royales, it's always divided. People think it looks a little bit too bling, a little bit too blingy. They don't really like that aesthetic, but to me, there's always going to be an opportunity to use it. I don't use it in every build because there's not going to be a use case for it for those aesthetics. Now, I'll get some close-ups, but this looks really, really sick to me. People might be like, oh, this is just gimmicky, but I always like to see how G.Skill can progress on their Royale theme they've had going. They've had this for, I would say, 5 or so years. I believe it was in DDR4, it wasn't in 3. They introduced it in DDR4, and now it's in the DDR5, but this is, I wouldn't say glitter on the side, but it's got a really nice texture. It's almost like fine sandpaper. You can get all the reflections, and then it has that Royale top like we're used to seeing before. One last part on this area while we're still here. Last Computex, all the craze for the memory companies was the CAM2 modules, which are these ones here. Now, we haven't really seen much development in that. I don't know if there's a bit of a communication issues between the motherboard manufacturers and the memory manufacturers. It seems like one side might want it, one side might not want it. I kind of feel like motherboard manufacturers are in a tricky position where they either want a board with it or without it, and that means it's going to mess up their SKU lineup. Now, there is a pretty sick looking Aorus Tachyon board. I'll get some B-roll. That is using a Cam 2 module, and it just gives you that whole different aesthetic, and I'm not used to seeing all of those dim slots removed. There's no Z height on the motherboard. It's completely flat, but apart from that, there's not much more information I can mention on the Cam 2 because it doesn't seem to be as popular now as it was going to be when we heard about it at Computex last year. Moving over to this side here, this is the AMD area. Now, you may notice on some of my motherboard unboxings that the specs are starting to show 256 gigabyte maximum supported memory for those boards. Now, obviously over here, G.Skill have 4 by 64 gigabyte kits. For AMD, you're looking at up to DDR5 7000. That's CL385050. So that's pretty sick. You can get something like a godlike like this. I'm really liking the aesthetics of this system. You can throw in 256 gigabytes of memory. I have my own personal workstation, and that has a workstation board, and even I don't have that much memory. Now, workstations we know can take a lot more than that, but even if you don't have a workstation board, you can now get up to something like 256. You don't need to go with the 48s or the 24, which they had previously. You can throw in 464s, and whatever you're using your memory for, people think, hey, I don't need that for gaming, but there's plenty of more use cases. You can throw in a high-end AMD CPU, and you can still do pretty good or very good workstation tasks with that, and now they have the memory to match it. Moving on to this one here. This one is G.Skill's fastest production memory, DDR5 10,600. So that's pretty insane. I had to think about it then because I've never said 10,600 before. This does not come in 64 gig modules. The max you'll get on this is 24, so this is 24 by 2. Of course, they've got it in the Apex and overclocking board because it's going to be tough to get 4 sticks like this running at that. And this is the AMD Apex. I've actually never seen the AMD Apex apart from the ROG booth because it is very, very new. Now, bear in mind that the faster speeds work better on the 8 series AMD Ryzen CPUs. Now, you might be running, what's the 8 series? Because it went from 7,000 to 9,000, that was the more OEM lineup of CPUs, like the 8500G, only because they had the single die. So the single die gives you that better performance. So it's going to be very hard to get 10,600 running on, say, like the latest 9950X 3D. That's why it's running on the 8500G. And once again, that is the 24 gigabytes by 2. I don't think that'll be available in the single 48s. That's why they just have the 2 by 24 in this system here. And one last thing I did notice is that this is running that orangey fluoro aesthetic on the memory, and they've actually got the doubly case from Inwin. If you watched our Inwin coverage on Computex, they had the new Delight chassis. That was similar to this, and I was mentioning the doubly case, which that one was based off, and this is it now. And one thing about the doubly case, this one here, is it does have that orange aesthetic, and you can see how that memory ties in if you do sort of set up your PC with the right theme. It does look pretty sweet. Now, this one is running some laptop DIMMs. So this is called C SODIMM. We're used to SODIMM normally for your laptops, but C, it does have a clock driver built in. So you're running an Intel platform. It's not just going to be for this little mini desktop PC. They have taken it out. Normally it would be in this encasing. They've taken it out just so we can get some good B-roll shots. I will get some on that because it's going to be very hard to see this. But basically up to DDR5 7200. They have 2 64 gigabyte modules in here, so that's a bit of a beast there. So if you had a laptop, something like that, I'm assuming the newer Intel laptops can take advantage of the clock driver for those on the Intel platform. But yeah, up to 200 megahertz for these modules. Now, I just talked about those 64 gig modules on the consumer side on those 2 PCs. Now over here, we have the same or similar 64 gig modules on the workstation side. So over here, we have 2 Threadripper platforms. Intel is going to be a little bit later for support, so we're just focusing on these Threadripper ones. We have 64 by 4 on this Asus Sage. These are both Sages. One is the TRX50 and the other one over here is the Pro WRX 90E. So for the Threadripper platform, I was told up to 8,000 megahertz, which is pretty insane. That's faster than on the consumer side that we just looked at. So 256 gig there for the 4 sticks, and then this one here is 512 for the 8 sticks. And the guys told me that this was very, very rushed. They only got these ICs literally last week, so they've had to scramble to get these together. But for Intel, that'll be a little bit later on. These ones are pretty much naked. I do believe that G.Skill do these modules in their Zeta range, so that may be coming later on. They probably just didn't have time to do that now, but as you can see there, no RGB, workstation focused memory only, and we can see this one over here that has the full decked out 8 modules. But I think that is it for our G.Skill coverage, just that new memory which we couldn't really talk about, these larger sticks, and then we also looked at the overclocking competition. Like always, I want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank G.Skill for supporting my coverage, and we'll see you in the next one.